Western Spring Television. Ours it is.
Good evening and welcome to Spring Global on Western Spring Television. Now the headlines. Governor Nasir El-Rufai hails Governor Nyesom Wike for backing power rotation to South. Kenya's opposition Azimio coalition calls for the reviewing of the country's constitution. Israeli army intercepts rocket fired from Lebanon amid the Al-Hausa mosque tension. My name is Tunde Edo. We begin in Nigeria, where Governor Nasir El-Rufai of Kaduna State has hailed his Rivers State counterpart Nyesom Wike for backing power rotation to southern Nigeria. Governor El-Rufai, who joined Governor Wike to commission the Eneka-Igbo-Eteche Link Road in the Obio-Akpo local government area of the state, said the people of the oil-rich South-South state voted quality over political sentiments. Governor El-Rufai, on behalf of the presidential candidate and the party, thanked the people of the state for making the right choice of voting Bola Tinubu. It is the first time since the Fourth Republic started in 1999 that the PDP was unable to get 25% in Rivers State.
I want, on behalf of our presidential candidate and our party, to thank you and the good people of Rivers State for making the right choice in voting for Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. It is the first time since the Fourth Republic started in 1999 that PDP was unable to get 25% in Rivers State. It shows that the people of Rivers can differentiate and they know when to vote for quality, and they voted quality over political sentiments. We want to thank you for providing that leadership, Governor Wike. This country belongs to all of us, and we have a duty to do all that it takes to make Nigeria an egalitarian, progressive.
And in Africa, Kenya's opposition Azimio coalition has called for the reviewing of the country's 13-year-old constitution to be part of discussions in its proposed dialogue with the government to end protest in the country. A statement released by opposition leader Raila Odinga after a meeting with Azimio's parliamentary group says they will be adding a review of the constitution to review the last vestiges of the imperial presidency. Mr. Odinga during the meeting said, should there be no meaningful dialogue with the Kenyan Kwanzaa, the people will resume demonstrations. Mr. Odinga has been holding bi-weekly protests since 20th of March against the cost of living and to oppose the appointment of a new electoral commission without consultations.
H. Initiate legislation to address the electoral, governance, and economic gaps identified during the inquiry for consideration by the Houses as appropriate. The Joint Task Force shall present its report to Parliament within 30 days of its establishment. Finally, we reiterate three important points. One, as J.F. Kennedy said, and I quote, civility is not a sign of weakness, and sincerity is always subject to proof. Two, the rights to assemble, demonstrate, petition, and speak are ironclad as provided for in our Constitution. Three, we reserve our right.
Police in South Africa says 9 suspected criminals behind a spate of attacks on security vans carrying cash have died during a shootout with officers. Visiting the scene in Sebokeng, south of Johannesburg, The police minister, Becky Selle, disclosed these, adding that several firearms were recovered. On Wednesday, 2 bystanders were shot dead by a heavily armed gang which had just targeted a security van east of Johannesburg. Cash in transit heists, as they are known in South Africa, are extremely common, with most of the attacks happening in the Gauteng and Eastern Cape provinces.
The scene where we are at Sebokeng again, we're in a house seems to be allegedly owned by a parolee, this house. And the police followed the information by the crime intelligence. 2 weeks ago, we have been hit around here, including the Harris area about 3-4 days ago. And we had to put the team, we had to respond on that one. And the crime intelligence, together with the team, responded. Those cars you see there, 3 of them were idling, were ready to roll. Those cars you see, there is an ML inside, beautiful ML, besides that beautiful X5 you see. They were rolling when the guys came here at a.
In the meantime, Ghanaian authorities have said 1,000 soldiers and police officers are being deployed to a northeastern border town after gunmen killed an immigration officer and left 2 others in hospital. It is not yet clear who opened fire on the vehicle in Boaku on Tuesday, but there have been concern about the security situation in the town due to the escalating jihadist conflict in neighboring Burkina Faso. There are fears that Islamist militants causing havoc across the Sahel region could destabilize countries further south, including Ghana and Ivory Coast. Boaku also has a long history of ethnic tensions with outbreaks of violence. In the United Kingdom, Buckingham Palace said that it is cooperating with an independent study exploring the relationship between the British monarchy and the slave trade in the 17th and 18th centuries. The palace said King Charles takes the issue profoundly serious. The research is being carried out by the University of Manchester with historic royal palaces. The palace, in a statement, said it was granting researchers full access to the royal archives and the royal collection. The palace statement comes after The Guardian published a previously unseen document showing the 1689 transfer of shares in the slave trading Royal African Company from Edward Colston, the slave traders, and the company's deputy governor to King William III. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden is expected to just attend one event during his visit to Northern Ireland. According to the BBC, the president was invited to storm out with the possibility of addressing its members to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. It was understood a visit to Queen's University was also being considered, but while no official details have been released, the BBC understands it will involve just one engagement at Ulster University. President Biden is due to open its new £350 million campus in Belfast. The U.S. president will also address business and civic leaders and may hold talks with the political parties on 12th of April. And elsewhere in Europe, colleagues of Silvio Berlusconi have expressed hope that Italy's former prime minister will return to frontline politics after he was rushed to intensive care with breathing problems. According to reports, the PM is being treated for a form of leukemia, a cancer of the blood, but he is in stable and alert condition. The four-time prime minister and media mogul, Mr. Berlusconi, said leads his party and is an elected senator, but his health has suffered. The 86-year-old was admitted to intensive care in the cardiac unit at San Raffaele Hospital in Milan yesterday, only 6 days after he was discharged following 4 days of checkups. He had surgery in 2016 and then contracted pneumonia in 2020 after catching COVID-19. He has since been treated in hospital on several occasions. To the Russia-Ukraine war, Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Belarusian counterpart Alexander Lukashenko have discussed expanding the economic cooperation and bolstering the defense ties between their nations. Mr. Putin said there will be close work on boosting cooperation under a union agreement, invasions, close political, economic, and military ties between Belarus and Russia. Russia used Belarusian territory as a staging ground for invading neighboring Ukraine and has maintained a contingent of troops and weapons there. Mr. Putin added that the construction of storage facilities for tactical nuclear weapons will be completed in Belarus by July the 1st. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron has met his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in Beijing as the French leader seeks to dissuade China from supporting Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Mr. Macron said he knows he can count on China to reason with Russia and bring everyone back to the negotiating table. He stated that the Russian aggression in Ukraine has dealt a blow to international stability. Mr. Xi also hailed ties between the two countries as positive and steady, adding that the world today is undergoing profound historical changes. You're watching Spring Global on Western Spring Television. We'll be right back after this break.
Funmilayo Ransome Kuti was an educationist and advocate of women's rights. She was recognized for her vitriolic comments against colonial policy of taxation as it affected the Nigerian women. Bere, as fondly addressed by her women followers, Funmilayo championed the initiation of universal adult suffrage, which gave an unprecedented leeway for women to contest elective offices and power to exercise voting rights. Married to a foremost educationist and teacher, Israel Oladoto Ransome Kuti, the first president of Nigeria Union of Teachers, Funmilayo Ransome Kuti was the mother of children who inherited her spirit of activism. Olufela Anbe Ololari, the former, a renowned musical legend. She was the first female student of Abeokuta Grammar School and the first female to own and drive a car in Nigeria. The award recipient of Member of Order of Nigeria MON and Lenin Peace Prize, was born on 25th October 1900 and was killed on 13th April 1978 by rampaging road soldiers in Lagos. Western Spring Television identifies Funmilayo Ransome Kuti as a watershed character in history.
Thank you so much for staying with us. Moving to other stories. In the Middle East, the Israeli army has said that it has intercepted a rocket fired from Lebanon after Israeli police attacked Palestinians inside Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque. The army, in a statement, said the rocket was successfully intercepted, adding that warning sirens sounded in the town of Shlomi and in Moshe Betzet in northern Israel this morning. According to Lebanese security sources, a second rocket attack was also launched from the southern part of the country, followed by a burst of Israeli artillery fire back across the border. Media reports also said that a child was injured in the rocket fire and that Israeli residents are being asked to stay in protected areas. There was no immediate comment from Lebanon's army or the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon. Still in Israel, At least 397 of the 450 Palestinians arrested by Israeli police during Tuesday night's raid have been released with a one-week ban from entering Al Hosn Mosque. The Palestinian Commission of Detainees Affairs confirmed the development in a statement. This comes as Palestinian men under the age of 40 were barred from entering the Al Hosn Mosque by Israeli police, while dozens of Israeli settlers entered the courtyard of the mosque under the protection of Israeli police. This report examines the tension around the mosque as Christians, Jews, Muslims celebrate the Passover and the holy month of Ramadan respectively.
Israeli police clashed with Palestinians at Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque a second time on Wednesday. Witnesses said hours after the arrest and removal of more than 350 people in a police raid at the compound, and despite a U.S. appeal to ease tensions. The confrontations during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan and on the eve of the Jewish Passover holiday triggered a cross-border exchange of fire in Gaza and stoked fears of further violence. Meanwhile, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is the third holiest site in Islam and is located on a hilltop complex known by Muslims as Al-Haram al-Sharif and by Jews as the Temple Mount. Jews revere it as the location of two biblical temples, and it is the holiest site in Judaism. On Tuesday, Palestinians barricaded themselves in the mosque after the evening Ramadan prayer, amid reports that Jewish extremists wanted to try to sacrifice a goat at the site for Passover. Israeli police and religious authorities have said they would not allow such an act to take place. Israeli police said in a statement that several law-breaking youths and masked agitators fortified the mosque in order to disrupt public order and desecrate the mosque. After many and prolonged attempts to get them out by talking to no avail, police forces were first to enter the compound in order to get them out with intentions to allow the Fajr and to prevent a violent disturbance, it added. The Palestinian Red Crescent said 12 Palestinians were injured in the earlier crash, including from rubber-tipped bullets and beatings. Israeli police said 2 officers were injured. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu insisted that the police had to act to restore order. White House National Security spokesman John Kirby voiced concern about the violence at the mosque and said it was imperative that Israelis and Palestinians de-escalate tensions. The Arab League held an emergency meeting after which it condemned the raid and said it endangered regional stability. Assistant Secretary General of the Arab League, Hosam Saki, says Israel's domestic issues are constantly reflected on Palestinians. Israel does not need a pretext to storm into Al-Aqsa Mosque.
We have agreed on a set of measures, diplomatic measures and political measures that will be applied. We are going to lobby governments throughout the international community in the United Nations, and we're going to help the Palestinians get the international protection that they need in a little while. Distributed for the whole media. Diplomatic measures in the United Nations, diplomatic measures and political measures with governments that recognize the two-state solution. Governments like the American government, European governments, all of them friends of peace, friends of the two-state solution. They do not want to see this type of violence, this type of unnecessary, brutal force applied against the Palestinians. No one wants to see things flare up like that. We need a period of calm. You said that this is a period of Passover, Ramadan, and Easter. Let us make this a period of calm and tranquility rather than a period of confrontation.
Nabil Abu Radane, spokesman for Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, said Israel's raid into Al-Aqsa Mosque, its assault on worshippers, is a slap to recent U.S. efforts which tried to create calm and stability during the month of Ramadan.
And success depends on the results. So far, we heard what we wanted to hear from the American side. He reiterated the commitment of President Biden, two-state solution, no unilateral actions, no expansion of settlements, no destructions of houses. This is the agenda of President Mahmoud Abbas. So far, the Israelis are not listening. The Americans are exerting good efforts. We hear good speeches, but the results on the ground are still zero. Escalating violence alone is not enough. We should come back to the principles of the peace. If the Israelis are willing, if the Israelis are serious, and if the Americans want to succeed, we have to go back to the principles of peace, which is the international law, two-state solution, not just a word. Two-state solution means two independent states.
According to diplomats, the United Arab Emirates and China asked the 15-member United Nations Security Council to discuss the situation behind closed doors on Thursday. The UAE's foreign ministry also said worshippers should not barricade themselves inside a mosque and places of worship with weapons and explosives. In a statement, UN Middle East envoy Tor Wensland said it was appalled by the images of violence inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque and urged political, religious and community leaders on all sides to reject incitement, inflammatory rhetoric and provocative actions. Jordan and Egypt, both involved in US-backed efforts to de-escalate Israel-Palestinian tensions, condemned the incident, as did Saudi Arabia, with which Israel hopes to normalize ties, said Israel's storming of Al-Aqsa undermined peace efforts. The Turkish president also weighed in on the crisis.
Ve Filistinli Müslümanları hedef almasından duyduğumuz üzüntüyü ve öfkeyi belirtmek istiyorum. Türkiye bu saldırılar karşısında asla sessiz ve hareketsiz kalamaz. Mescid-i Aksa'ya el uzatılması, Harem-i Şerif'in kutsiyetinin ayaklar altına alınması bizim kırmızı çizgimizdir. Kudüs'e gerektiğinde canları pahasına sahip çıkan Filistinli kardeşlerimiz yalnız değildir. Müslümanların ilk kıblesine yönelik alçak eylemleri ülkem ve milletim adına kınıyor.
Temitope Ajijolaoluwaola, Western Spring Television.
In the U.S., the Justice Department has said it will investigate the death of a Washington, D.C. teenager who was shot by a police officer sitting behind him in a car. According to the police, Delano Martin, age 17, was asleep in a parked stolen SUV when officers opened the door on the 18th of March. Body cam shows police steadily entering the vehicle to make an arrest, while the suspect, who was black, speeds away with an officer in the back seat. After telling him to stop, the officer opened fire on the teenager from behind. The Justice Department in the news release said the loss of a life was always tragic, but is especially heartbreaking when it involves a child. Footage released today showed officers conferring on how to arrest the suspect as he apparently dozes in a car with a running engine. In other news, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, has said a continuous slowdown in almost all the world's advanced economies is expected to drag global growth below 3% this year. IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva gave the warning today ahead of the IMF and World Bank spring meeting next week. Ms. Georgieva, in prepared remarks, said with the rising geopolitical tensions and still high inflation, a robust recovery remains elusive. Global growth almost halved last year to 3.4% as the impact of Russia's invasion of Ukraine rippled through the world economy, abruptly halting the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. And talking sports, Frank Lampard says he will focus on the job in hand after being named Chelsea's caretaker manager rather than trying to land the role full-time. Lampard has completed a surprise return to the London side for the rest of the season. Replacing the sacked Graham Potter, the club says Lampard will take charge while they carry out an exhaustive process to find a permanent boss. The The 44-year-old, speaking after he was named the interim manager, said he wants to do the best possible thing he can do. Lampard, who has been out of a job since he was dismissed by Everton in January, previously managed Chelsea from July 2019 until he was sacked in January 2021.
It's a pretty easy decision for me. This is my club in terms of my playing career and having coached here before. So I have a lot of emotions and feelings towards the club. I'm also a very practical person, and when you become a manager, you understand that you don't manage your own club, the club that you say is your club forever. And obviously I've been on a different path since I left Chelsea. But to come back in a time where the club have asked me to come and take the role, of course that's the most important thing, but also with a belief that I can come and help the cause in this period to the end of the season. So I'm delighted to get that opportunity, and I want to be, I'm thankful for that, to the people that have decided to give me that opportunity. I'm confident in myself. I have a good understanding of the squad. Of course, I've worked with a lot of them before, but also the training ground, the stadium, the fans, what Chelsea fans want, and I'll do my utmost in this period coming to give them what they want with my own hard work.
Have you been told that this is strictly until the end of the season, regardless of what happens on the pitch?
No, but I think the role and the explanation of my role speaks for itself and the period that I'm here for. So on that term, I'm not getting anywhere ahead of myself. I want to do the best possible role I can in a way that I can impact the club in the best way in this period.
And before we end Spring Global, here is a recap of our top stories. Governor Nasir El-Rufai of Kaduna State has hailed his real estate counterpart, Nyesom Wike, for backing power rotation to southern Nigeria. Kenya's opposition Azimio coalition has called for the reviewing of the country's 13-year-old constitution to be part of discussions in its proposed dialogue with the government. The Israeli army has said that it has intercepted a rocket fired from Lebanon after Israeli police attacked Palestinians inside Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque. You can follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. I am Tunde Ido. Good evening.
Èdè Yorùbá